It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. This is Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital, and joining me today, the man himself, the smartest guy in the room, the mayor, the governor of Beckerville, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
How are you, Mr. Michael?
Things are going good. So what's new in the old capital world? What's coming up?
Don't forget October 25th, House of Blues, Dallas. Old Capital Multifamily Conference. We want you to be there. Great opportunity to network and get yourself educated about what's going on in the multifamily space from I think a couple of guys that kind of know what's going on. We want you to be part of that. We are going to be introducing who our keynote speaker is, going to probably be in the next month or so. We look forward to having you meet that person up on stage. Remember last year we had Roger Staubach.
Captain Comeback.
The guy that most people consider one of the best quarterbacks, but he was in real estate. And when he was a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, he was putting together his real estate company. And he spoke fantastic in front of about 750 people or so. He was great. The year before, we had Rob O'Neill, who shot and killed Osama bin Laden. Talked a little bit about teamwork and how he found himself in the middle of Pakistan, to have a problem cured, so to speak. So our guest speakers are always good, and we look forward to having you come to the Old Capital Multifamily Conference. Go to the oldcapitalpodcast.com website, oldcapitalpodcast.com website, and register for there. Also, don't forget two things. One, if you do have a question for Ask Mike Mondays, make sure that you go on the oldcapitalpodcast.com website and ask the question. Be more than happy to answer those for you, Mike will. And the second thing is that if you do want to get more information on financing multifamily properties, don't forget the white paper report and get that downloaded on oldcapitalpodcast.com. Some great information that Mike, James Eng, and myself put together, just kind of give you the basics of underwriting and what setting the expectations correctly on financing apartments. And since we did $1 billion in apartment financing in 2018, we are more than happy to share some inside information on that. So Ask Mike Mondays. I love these Ask Mike Mondays because we ask Mike the questions that you want to know. Michael, as you know, has done over $1 billion in apartment ownership. He worked for a large national bank and then has transferred into apartment ownership. So from loaning money to owning real estate, he has over $650 million in assets, over 7,200 units you guys bought. Now you guys sold a few. Now you have about over 5,000 doors.
That sounds like a lot, right?
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to take a vacation this year?
I got 2 this summer. So luckily what you can do with this business is if you get yourself set up with the system and team and staff, you can work remotely for a good chunk of it as well. So I'm going to take a few weeks in Hawaii and kind of work from Hawaii instead of the 100-degree heat in July in Dallas.
Well, thank God it's nice and cool in Hawaii, but thank God we have air conditioning in Texas.
That's right.
So on Ask Mike Mondays, Michael, how do you prepare for a takeover of a building? I think that's a good topical question because in the last, say, month or two, Michael has taken over 2 buildings. And so at a big picture, Michael, kind of lead us down the path to what it took for you when you acquired the property and say the day, the hour of, the day of, the week after. What did it take for the takeover?
Yeah, I mean, really, there's a bunch of lead up to it, and then there's the actual takeover. So we'll talk kind of about the lead up. When you guys are, in escrow buying a property, you do your due diligence on it. Part of that's kind of like the physical inspection. Part of that's kind of the financial aspects of it. So when we do our physical inspection, if there's some things of note, we know that that need to be kind of addressed immediately, like, active termites or, some life and safety type of stuff or any sort of lender specific things. Those are things that we hopefully during our escrow period start getting prepared for, start getting bids, get a plan in place and, try to knock those out, really shortly after takeover. And then the other part of it is the diligence for the financial part of it. So when you're going through that, one of the major things that you'll get as part of the diligence is all your service contracts. And so some of those will be assumed, some of those must be assumed, and some of those you'll replace with new service contracts. So this is largely what your management company does for you. So what you'll do is the must assumes you assume, and then you'll kind of compare all the others relative to what the similar vendors that your management company uses and try to figure out, is this a better rate? Is this a better fit for this property? Or should we replace the trash vendor with our normal trash vendor? So you kind of get all those set up. So that is kind of like a lot of the ramp up, the lead up The other thing the management company will do is make sure they typically interview the on-site staff if the current ownership group's not going to take them with them. And you try to keep as much of the staff as possible, unless there's just a real reason why you don't want to. So you kind of at least during the transition have some continuity with the staffing. Try to make sure you understand where kind of the bodies are buried on the property, in particular if it's a little bit older property. Does the second boiler leak or does it have some funky thing to it? And try to kind of download that tribal knowledge about the properties that the maintenance guys in particular have, or the office staff has about the tenants and things like that. And then once you kind of get a few months of operational experience underneath your belt, maybe they're not the right fit, maybe they are, and then you can always make adjustments to the staffing down the road. So it's kind of a lot of the lead up. The day of, honestly, it's pretty anticlimactic the way we do it. Not saying there's not a lot of work going on, but when the first property I bought, I was like, the day we bought it, I drove out there and was standing on the property and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm just kind of getting in the way, kind of got the professionals in place and they kind of doing their thing. There's a lot of stuff going on. If I stand there on the property, I'm just kind of like distracting from them and getting in the way. So just typically let the management company get out there, kind of, let them know the anticipated timing and closing during the day. Is it going to be noon? Is it going to be, later in the day? And then they tend to get out there a couple hours before anticipated closing, start working with the existing management team, get all the passwords and keys and, any sort of open items. There's also a bunch of reports you get the day of as far as like open tenant ledgers, like who owes the property rent, make sure all the security deposits match up, get just kind of all that type of things. And then they'll go in and upload that into our management software and make sure that the opening ledgers and rent roll and all that stuff is accurate at takeover. And, from there, once they kind of have that handover, it's usually a couple hours, and then the whole team goes away, and then we have operational control of the deal. Through that process, we need to make sure that the website's transferred, the telephone number's transferred, the utilities are set up and transferred over as well. Make sure you bind your insurance, all that good stuff. So that's kind of generally what we do high level on takeover, Paul.
What has gone wrong?
Geez, what has gone wrong? Lots of things go wrong, right? Earlier on my career, we didn't realize this electric contract on a master metered electric property was not cancelable. It still had term on it, and we put a new electric contract on it, and we had two contracts, which became a big problem. So luckily, we were able to negotiate our way out of one of them at no real cost to us. But that could have been a big mistake, a 5-figure mistake for sure, and breakage fees. So pay attention to the contracts you must assume. So that is something that you need to make sure you read these contracts so you don't double dip on your contracts.
And how do you let the tenants know that there's a new ownership group in town?
So when the takeover is part of the closing documents, there'll be a tenant notice letter, and then the maintenance staff will just go put it on everyone's door that, hey, the old group's out, the new group's in. Here's some changes how you write your checks or how you make your online portal payments or whatever. And, if you have any questions, stop in the office. So it's like a tenant notice letter, basically. The old management company's out, new management company's in. That's basically it.
On this last transaction, were you able to, or did you want to keep the old staff in place?
We kept some of them. So we thought we had hired and agreed to hire the assistant manager there, and then she was going to get promoted up. And then at the 11th hour, she took a job somewhere else. So then we had a scramble and backfill, and they just put someone from another property over there temporarily as we're trying to backfill that slot. So that happens more often than you would think it would, but people kind of commit to something and they back out 11th hour. So that happened. I'm trying to think. That was a pretty smooth takeover, but we took over from Lincoln Properties was managing it. So they're, a real large institutional property management company. If you take over from Joe Smo's management company or mom and pop, you tend to have a little bit more bumpy road on the transition. So some of the first deals we did were older, smaller, less sophisticated groups selling it, management teams managing it. So there's more BS that tends to go into that than you do if you buy a nice, pretty property with a professional management company.
On these older properties, not the newer, cleaner ones that you guys do, but some of these older properties, a couple of years ago, did you guys do appreciation lunches, picnics for the client tenants?
Yeah, you try to do
when do you do that?
Resident event pretty early on, kind of get to know if there's new staff, get to know new staff. Right now, you might throw like a pool party because the pool is just opening up, so kind of have a tenant pool party, so you get to kind of know their neighbors. So you pay attention to that. Before takeover, one of the things that we do and we try to get in all the contracts is make sure a provision that all the units that have been vacant for more than 3 days or 5 days are in rent ready condition. Then anything that's not rent ready condition, we get a credit of X amount of dollars. So like $500 a unit or $750 a unit. that will credit at close. And then 2 or 3 days before closing, we go get an updated rent roll and we walk all the vacant units. And then if there's any units not rent ready, then we get told by our management company, these 3 units are not rent ready, go get your $500 each. So get $1,500 credit at closing. So that's something that we also try to do and make sure we have eyes on all the vacant units, so we kind of know what we're walking into.
Going back to the tenant appreciation picnics or brunches or things like that, who pays for that?
The property level does. So, so it's a marketing cost. So it's within your marketing line item.
Do you have some, maybe your insurance vendors that will write individual policies for the tenants on their property?
Yep. So that's a big thing now, is making sure your tenants have renter's insurance. So if they fall asleep cooking grease on the stove, which happens more often than you think it would, and they set, a couple units on fire, that you could subrogate the claim, meaning that you can go after their renter's insurance to cover your deductible, and then your insurance carrier could go after their insurance for anything that they have.
So talk more about that. Do you guys share in any of the premiums on the insurance, or you just have them do the pool parties, or,
Yeah, sometimes you get like your landscape vendor might chip in $500 for something, or your flooring vendor chip in some money to kind of defray some marketing costs. So that's certainly a way you can try to go about that if you're limited in your marketing budget, or you're just trying to be, good steward of the capital. So that's certainly something that you try to get some of your vendors that you pay, tens and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to cut landscaping across the portfolio. Try to give back a little bit and chip in as well. One of the other things that we've kind of been screwed on in the past, Paul, is when you buy a property, you get an inventory list. So, you're not only buying the real estate, but you're buying the personal property. So the contents of the model, the contents of the office, the contents of the maintenance shop. So we bought properties, we walk in, there's no key machine. They took the key making machine, and they took the AC recovery machine. There's no ladder on the property, so any one of those things isn't that big a deal on its own. But if you have to go buy $5,000 in equipment that you weren't budgeting for, that could be a problem. So making sure that, you get your inventory list, and then you go spot check the inventory when you're done and you buy the deal. And if it's missing, you go back to the seller because they breached the contract. They took something they shouldn't have.
Let's go the reverse on this, is that you guys are taking over a property and you've kind of put all those things out there. But if you're selling a property and right before you go to sell the property, there's a fire on the property.
Yep.
So
your duty to disclose that to the seller, and then you go to your casualty clause of your contract and determine is it material or not material. So in the casualty clause, usually there's a dollar threshold that if it exceeds X amount of dollars, that the buyer has the option of terminating, get their earnest money back. If below, the seller has to, typically, if it can't restore the property in time of the closing, they have to file a claim, credit the deductible to the seller at closing, and then work with the buyer at closing. And the seller works with their insurance company and the buyer in like a tri-party agreement, basically, to kind of finish the claim off after transfer of ownership. And that's happened to us a couple times before as well.
Can be complicated, but you've gotten through it.
There's contracts for reasons, and there's all these claims and sections, and I didn't really fully appreciate what the casualty clause of a contract was until we saw our property on the news one night, because it was we're in escrow and it was on fire, and then all of a sudden that kind of got burned, no pun intended, burned into my brain to pay attention to the condemnation and casualty clauses.
So make sure that your contracts attorney puts that in there. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a pretty typical thing in all of it. So just make sure when you're doing that it matters, right? So that one was a $28 million purchase or something like that. We had a $4 million threshold, so 15% of the property or something. And that wasn't something I ever paid attention to. So if you're buying a property, you want to make sure your casualty condemnation clause is as low as possible. If you're selling a property, you want to make sure it's high as possible. So kind of depending on what side of the coin you're on, it kind of outlines your objective and what you're trying to get there.
What is going on in the SPI world today? If somebody wanted to get more information about what you guys do.
Oh, yeah. Really, the easiest way of finding out more information about us is simply go to our company's website, which is www.spiadvisory.com. That's SPI like spy advisory.com. There's a contact us form. Fill that out. I'm always happy to have a 10 to 15-minute telephone call with listeners off of the podcast. Really, what we focus on, Paul, is predominantly just raising money and buying high quality deals. So certainly many people that have reached out off the podcast have been gracious enough to invest their hard earned money in many of our deals, and so we certainly appreciate that. And always happy to have calls with people we meet off the podcast.
That's fantastic. Some great information today, Mike. We appreciate you bringing us up to date about what's going on when somebody is thinking about doing a takeover of a property. So that's great. Okay, that was Michael Becker. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.